Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. The air is thick with the smell of wet wool and stale waste. Overhead, a single bare bulb casts a sickly yellow glow over the cramped space, barely illuminating the rows upon rows of men sleeping shoulder to shoulder. Their uniforms are grimy, their faces haggard. In the flickering light, you see Lieutenant Sidney Herbert Gibbon, his neck craned awkwardly on his threadbare pillow. Private William John Young, half buried in his blanket. Private William John Simpson, his chin resting on his folded arms. On another bunk, Private Edward John Callow, Private Joseph Byers, Private George Ellison, Private James Johnson. Do you see? Every face is different, every story unique. Yet they are all anonymous here, their individuality swallowed by the dehumanizing system of rank and number. It's 1916, and this is life in the trenches of World War I. The incessant threat of death shapes every aspect of their existence. When the whistles blow, they drop what they're doing and run to the safety of the dugout. Meals are eaten quickly, often cold, because a surprise attack could come at any moment. Even sleep is a luxury they can ill afford, constantly disturbed by the rumble of artillery or the sudden shout of a sentry. There are lice, rats, disease, boredom, exhaustion. Then there's the ever-present mud. It clings to their bodies, seeps into their boots, and fills their dreams with images of sucking, suffocating sludge. They dream of home, of loved ones, of the simple pleasures of life outside the trenches. But home seems a world away, and these men are trapped in a cycle of mud, blood, and bone. You might wonder, why do they stay? What keeps them going in such dreadful conditions? For many, it's duty, a sense of service to king and country. For some, it's loyalty to their comrades, forged in the fires of shared experience. And for a few, it's hope, the hope of a better world that will emerge from the ashes of this war. As I stand among them, watching them eat, shave, or mend their tattered uniforms, I see not just soldiers, but human beings trying to maintain their humanity in the face of dehumanizing circumstances. Life in the trenches was a grim reality for soldiers on both sides of the conflict. While tonight we focus on the British, keep in mind that their French allies endured the same hardships. The French army had been fighting for 2 years before the British Expeditionary Force arrived in 1914. They too dug in, creating an extensive network of tunnels and fortifications. By the time the BEF joined them, the French were masters of trench warfare. But let's return to our British soldiers. Let me introduce you to Captain Charles Upham, an officer in the London Scottish. Charles has been on the front lines for months. He's seen friends and foes alike fall victim to this brutal war. He carries within him the weight of leadership, the responsibility of ensuring his men complete their missions while keeping them as safe as possible, which is often a near impossibility. His diary entries paint a vivid picture of trench life. He writes of the constant threat of shelling, the oppressive heat, the never-ending battle against the elements, and the toll it all takes on the men's morale. In his spare time, he teaches his men basic skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic, attempting to provide them with some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. Sometimes they have books sent from home, and they share them, reading aloud to each other, finding solace in stories from a world far removed from the trenches. Occasionally, a soldier might find a discarded German book or magazine. These become prized possessions, passed from hand to hand, offering a glimpse into the lives of their enemies. One day, a rumor spreads through the ranks that the war is nearly over. The men talk in hushed tones, their eyes shining with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Could this be true? Has their sacrifice been in vain? Or is there light at the end of this dark tunnel? That night, when the usual evening shelling begins, it feels different. This time, it's laced with fear and uncertainty. What does the future hold for them? Will they ever see their homes again? Will they ever know peace? As I walk among them, listening to their stories, sharing their fears and their dreams, I am struck by their resilience, their ability to endure the unbearable. Here in the trenches, I am reminded that behind every statistic, every military victory or defeat, there is a human story. And these stories deserve to be told, to be remembered. And so our journey continues, moving beyond the trenches, up to the surface, where officers planned strategies and high-ranking politicians declared victories and made treaties. At least, that was the plan. In reality, few emerged from the trenches unscarred. All of them were affected by the horrors they had witnessed, the lives they had taken and lost. But what of those who held the power to send them there? How did they fare? Meet Lord Beaverbrook, British politician and member of the Beaverbrook family. Beaverbrook had risen to prominence as a successful newspaper proprietor, known for his sharp wit and political acumen. With the outbreak of war, he saw an opportunity to advance his career and secure his place in history. He entered politics and was soon appointed to the post of Lord Chancellor, a position that gave him significant influence over the conduct of the war. From his comfortable office in Whitehall, Beaverbrook directed the flow of men and resources, confident in the belief that his decisions were vital to the war effort. He believed that victory was imminent, that the war would be a swift affair, and that his role in it would be pivotal. However, as the war dragged on and the casualties mounted, Beaverbrook's hubris began to crumble. The reality of the stalemate on the Western Front, the mud, the blood, the body bags seeped into his consciousness. He grappled with the realization that his youthful enthusiasm had not prepared him for the grim realities of total war. His wife, Lady Ottoline Morell, tried to shield him from the worst of it, providing him with a haven of domesticity and affection. But even she could not save him from the haunting images that filled his nightmares. Each night he dreamt of the trenches, of the men he had sent to fight and die there. The screams of the wounded echoed in his ears, and the stench of rotting flesh clung to his clothes. One day, he received a letter. It was written in the elegant script of a bygone era, penned by a young officer whose name had become synonymous with the horror of war, Captain Charles Upham. The letter spoke of bravery, of camaraderie, and above all, of loss. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of Beaverbrook's policies. He found himself torn between his patriotic duty and his growing pacifism. The question tormented him. How long could he bear the weight of sending men to their deaths without feeling complicit in their suffering? He sought solace in his work, throwing himself into his duties with renewed vigor, hoping to find some measure of redemption in the successful prosecution of the war. Yet, despite his efforts, the spectre of the trenches loomed over him, a constant reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of this conflict. One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his Whitehall apartment overlooking the Thames, he felt the full weight of his burden. The river flowed serenely below, oblivious to the horrors that were being inflicted in its name. In that moment, he knew he could not go on. He resigned his position, hoping to live out the remainder of his days in peaceful obscurity. But the war had changed him. The nightmares followed him. The guilt clung to him like a shroud. He could not escape the trenches, not in his waking hours and not in his dreams. So our journey ends with him, a man who held the power to shape the course of the war, a man who sent thousands to the trenches, a man who could not escape the ghosts of those he had sent to die. Tonight, we have walked in the mud, smelled the waste and heard the whispers of ghosts in the trenches of World War I. We've seen the toll the war took on those who fought and on those who sent them to fight. Remember their stories, for they are a testament to the human spirit, to its capacity for endurance, for compassion, and for the unsettling choices that sometimes define our history. As we close this chapter, Ask yourself, what stories do you want to remember? What voices do you want to amplify? For in remembering, we honor the past and ensure that the lessons it holds resonate in our present and guide us in our future. Death and danger were ever present. A shell could fall at any moment, ending lives instantly. At times the threat felt inescapable. Consider spending a night in a frontline trench during World War I. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Around you men sleep fitfully, their bodies curled tight in an attempt to stay warm. The trench is a labyrinth of dugouts and communication trenches, each one a microcosm of this strange underworld. You find your way to your own little hole, little more than a shallow pit carved into the side of the trench. There's just enough room for a man to crouch. Imagine lying down here, pulling your coat around you, seeking a measure of comfort in the meager darkness. The flickering glow of a candle illuminates faces, haggard and drawn, etched with the weariness of war. The flame dances in the draught, mirroring the uneasy lull in the battle. Any moment could bring an attack, a storm of steel and fire. Above you, the sky is a distant memory, lost behind the high walls of packed earth and sandbags that form the parapet. The trench is a world unto itself, cut off from the sun and stars, existing in a perpetual twilight. Somewhere in the distance, a shell explodes, sending echoes reverberating through the gloom. The men stir, their eyes snapping open, rifles clutched tightly. For a moment, there is only the sound of men breathing, their bodies tense. Then, as quickly as it began, the quiet returns, heavy and expectant. Time slows. Each tick of the clock seems amplified, echoing in the silence. The hours crawl by, measured only by the occasional cough or the rustle of a rat darting through the undergrowth. A low moan escapes a sleeping soldier, swallowed by the gloom. The darkness presses in, heavy and alive with unseen things, the scent of damp earth and decay. A rat scuttles past, its tiny claws clicking on the hard-packed ground. Above, the muffled thud of distant artillery fire serves as a grim reminder of the world that exists just beyond the protective barrier of the trench. Here, death is always near. A discarded helmet bears the mark of an explosion, forever frozen in its silent scream. Nearby, a tattered blanket is pulled tight around a mound of earth, concealing the grave of a fallen comrade. Sleep is a fitful thing in this subterranean world. Dreams are haunted by the images of the day, the flash of explosions, the cries of the wounded. Waking is little different from sleeping. The boundaries blur, the world outside the trench fading into a distant memory. Time is measured by the rhythm of the night, the chilling hoot of an owl, the mournful call of a distant dog. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a sharp crack. A twig snaps, a foot falls. Instinctively, the men in the trench tense, their bodies alert, rifles raised. But it's only a patrol, their own side moving restlessly in the darkness. The night wears on. The chill of the earth seeps into your bones despite the layers of clothing. A cough echoes in the darkness, a warning sign of the sickness that lingers in the shadows. Trench fever, they called it. Hope is a fragile thing in this subterranean world. Letters from home arrive, bearing the sweet scent of a distant hearth and the promise of a better tomorrow. They tell of lives lived above ground, of sunshine and laughter, of simple pleasures that now seem like a faded dream. The words are read and reread, a lifeline thrown across the abyss of war, connecting the past to the present. Sleep comes at last, but it is a restless sleep, filled with fleeting images and sounds. Explosions, screams, the clatter of arms. You wake in a cold sweat, the echoes of nightmares still ringing in your ears. The night is far spent. The sky outside the trench is beginning to lighten, but here in the darkness, it is still night. As dawn approaches, the tension in the trench grows. The men prepare for the coming day, readying their rifles, checking their equipment, bracing themselves for whatever the new day may bring. One by one, they take their positions along the parapet, silent sentinels watching over the wasteland of no man's land. The sky turns a sickly shade of green, then black, then the grey of a winter sky. A lone bird cries out, its call echoing over the desolate landscape. Light filters down the trench, revealing the grime and exhaustion of the men, the haunted look in their eyes. The day begins. Dawn breaks over the ravaged landscape. The men in the trench shift restlessly, their bodies weary, their spirits drained. Another day in this subterranean world. They share a look, a nod, a wordless understanding passes between them. They have seen too much of war to speak their fears aloud. The rising sun casts long shadows over the trench, turning it into a jagged scar on the landscape. The men move like wraiths in the dim light, their forms distorted, their faces hidden behind helmets and gas masks. There's a rustling in the trench, a cough, a muttered prayer. The rats dart away, seeking refuge in the darkness. The men pull themselves together, preparing to face another day in this living nightmare. But as they stand there, silhouetted against the weak light, they seem less like soldiers and more like ghosts, the living dead haunting the ruins of a shattered world. The day drags on. The men wait, watchful, patient, their senses honed for danger. The silence is broken only by the rasp of a voice calling out orders, the distant rumble of artillery fire, the slap of a rifle butt against a man's back. And all the while, the oppressive heat presses down on them, mingling with the stench of sweat, decay, and waste. The men shift from foot to foot, seeking a brief respite from the discomfort. Some find momentary solace in writing letters, their words a lifeline to a world that feels increasingly distant. Others seek distraction in games or stories, their voices hushed but determined to hold on to a piece of normalcy. But the relentless heat and the ever-present danger weave a tapestry of tension, and the men find themselves caught in its suffocating embrace. As the day wanes, the light fades, and with it the strength of the men ebbs. They slump against the trench walls, their shoulders slumped, their eyes vacant. The world beyond the trench grows darker, but here, in the heart of the labyrinth, the darkness has already fallen. The shadows lengthen, twisting familiar shapes into menacing forms. The men huddle together for warmth, sharing stories, jokes, memories of a time before the war. But the laughter is strained, the stories told in hushed tones. Fear lingers in their eyes, unspoken but palpable. Then, from the darkness beyond the trench, a sound slices through the night. A scream, a shout, the clatter of arms. The men spring into action, their bodies tense, their rifles raised. In the darkness, they are hunters and prey, caught in a deadly game of cat and mouse. The night is alive with movement, with whispers of danger and the promise of pain. The men move like phantoms, their faces obscured by the darkness, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and determination. They fight, they struggle, they wait. The night deepens and the drama unfolds in the darkness, a silent ballet of death and survival. As the night wears on, the sounds of battle fade, leaving behind a heavy silence. The men settle back into the trench, their bodies weary, their minds numb. They tend to their wounds, sharing what little food they have, trying to find a semblance of peace in the midst of chaos. But the night is far from over, and they know that with the first light of dawn, the struggle will begin anew. We're all about voices here on the World War I project. Voices of the soldiers and civilians who lived through this conflict, whose stories are essential if we are to understand the past. And today, we have a chance to hear a great one. Let's set the stage. Imagine you are standing in a trench, the air heavy with the smell of stale water and old waste. Around you, men in muddy uniforms shift restlessly. Some clean their rifles, others stare sightlessly ahead. They've been in this trench too long. You can see the stretchers laid out ready for new patients. The men here are already numbed by the constant fear of going over the top and being mowed down by bullets. Life has narrowed for them to this moment right here, to this instant where they peer out over no man's land, knowing that in a few minutes they will be running across that open space toward almost certain death. You feel suddenly that the story you've heard about the war is now your own. You realize this is a new kind of story altogether. This is your story. Welcome to the World War I project. This week our focus is on the poets of World War I. And since this is a project about stories, it seemed fitting to share with you one soldier's story, a story that might have been yours or your grandfather's. And who better to tell that story than Wilfred Owen, one of the greatest poets of the war? Let me paint a picture for you. Amid the millions of men who passed through the trenches, a few voices rose from the mud and silence to leave words that still echo. One of those was Wilfred Owen. His life was short, only 25 years, yet his poems gave form to the feelings many soldiers could never quite express. Imagine him now, a young man with soft features and thoughtful eyes. He was born in 1893 in Shropshire, England, to a modest family. His father worked on the railway, his mother took care of the home. From early on, Wilfred showed a gift for language. He loved poetry, both reading it and writing it, finding comfort in words, in rhythm, in the images of nature. As a young man, he studied, tutored, and dreamed of a life filled with literature. War was not his calling. When the First World War began in 1914, he hesitated. It was not until 1915 that he enlisted, more out of a sense of duty and social pressure than out of personal desire. Training was harsh, but it could not fully prepare him for what awaited in France. In 1917, he was sent to the Western Front, where he saw firsthand the filth, the fear, and the endless waiting in trenches like those you've just imagined. His letters home speak with a mix of restraint and quiet pain. He described the landscape, cratered and lifeless. He wrote of men shivering in the cold, of long nights broken by the sudden flare of rockets. Yet he also wrote with tenderness, trying not to worry his family too much. It was during this time that Owen began composing the poems that would later define him. His language was precise yet haunting, capturing both the beauty and the horror of what he saw. He wrote of gas attacks, of the haunting cries of wounded men, of the terrible contrast between the ideals of patriotism and the reality of mud and despair. But life at the front left its mark on him. In 1917, he was caught in an explosion and suffered what was then called shell shock. Today, we would think of it as a form of post-traumatic stress. His nerves were frayed. He struggled with nightmares and tremors. He was sent to Craiglockhart War Hospital in Scotland to recover. It was there, in the quiet halls of the hospital, that he met another poet-soldier, Siegfried Sassoon. Sassoon was older, more established, and more outspoken against the war. Their friendship was a turning point for Owen. Sassoon encouraged him, guided his writing, and pushed him to be bold in expressing the truth of trench life. In the safety of the hospital, Owen wrote some of his finest work. His poems became vivid portraits of the men he served beside, their suffering, their small moments of dignity, their shared endurance. He did not write of glory or triumph. He wrote of exhaustion, of pity, of humanity buried beneath mud and shell fire. By 1918, though, he returned to the front. Despite his illness, despite opportunities to remain away from battle, he felt compelled to go back. Perhaps it was duty, perhaps solidarity with the men who had no choice. The final months of the war were some of the most brutal. Owen continued to write whenever he could, shaping the chaos around him into words of clarity. His last letter home, written in October of 1918, described the calm beauty of the French countryside even as the guns still thundered. On November 4, 1918, Just 1 week before the armistice, Wilfred Owen was killed in action while leading his men across a canal in northern France. His family received the telegram announcing his death as the church bells rang to celebrate peace. Owen left behind only a handful of published poems during his lifetime, but after the war, his work was gathered and shared, thanks largely to Sassoon's efforts. Today, his verses remain among the most powerful testimonies of the First World War, giving voice to the silence of so many who could not speak. So imagine him, not as a distant figure in a textbook, but as a young man in damp boots, notebook tucked into his pocket, scratching down lines by candlelight. His words captured the trench experience in ways that facts alone could never convey. Through him, we glimpse both the suffering and the stubborn humanity of soldiers in the Great War. You've now journeyed into the heart of a World War I soldier's experience. What struck you most about Owen's story? His words. How do they shape the way you understand the war? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, this is just one story in a larger narrative. There are countless more voices waiting to be heard. If you're eager to dive deeper into the stories of World War I, we invite you to check out our website, where you can continue exploring this immersive experience. With that said, until next time, thank you for listening. May the stories of courage and resilience continue to inspire you. Keep exploring, keep listening, and keep sharing these stories with the world. See you soon. And then there's this. It feels like nothing else around me, just different. And it is because it is different. This is a trench. All around us are trenches. These are the famous trenches of the Western Front, pitted into the surface of the Somme in northern France. They are what remain of one of the most horrific theaters of war in history. Here in the first half of the 20th century, men fought and died by the thousands in a single day. Here, over millions of square miles, a new type of warfare was born. A war of attrition where soldiers faced each other across a wasteland of mud and blood. For 4 years, they defended their positions, attacked, retreated, fortified, only to lose their gains to artillery fire, sniper bullets, and poison gas. And at the center of it all, these trenches. But look closer. What you see here is only the tip of the proverbial iceberg. The world of the First World War was 2 worlds. Above the surface, there were the killing fields and the stalemate. Below the surface, there was another world. Not a world of mud and blood, but a world of darkness, dust and danger, a world of chalk and shadow, a world of tunnels. This is a tunnel. Well, it's actually a whole network of them. Here underneath the surface, the landscape changes. The air grows cooler, carrying the faint smell of chalk dust and damp stone. The walls are close, the ceiling low enough that you must stoop. In the faint glow of a lantern, the space stretches onward into passageways that seem to weave endlessly, one into another. And here, you feel a different side of the war, one that's quieter, more hidden, and perhaps even stranger than the violence above. This is a place where soldiers came to take shelter from the storm of war. The Somme battlefield in northern France is remembered for its devastating battles in 1916, when thousands of men were lost in a single day. Yet beneath that scarred landscape lies something quieter, more secret. Over the years, archaeologists have uncovered vast networks of tunnels, some carved from chalk, others reinforced with timbers, where soldiers sought shelter from the storm of war. They've found a piece of everything here. Here in the Somme region, entire networks have been unearthed, remarkably preserved. Wooden ladders still lean against walls, graffiti remains clear, and in some cases, personal belongings lie undisturbed where they were left. These tunnels were not simple holes in the ground. Many were carefully engineered, lined with timber supports, and connected to the surface by ladders and hidden entrances. Inside, there were chambers for sleeping, for planning attacks, for storing supplies. Some tunnels extended right beneath no man's land, so that explosives could be placed under enemy positions and detonated in a sudden burst of earth and fire. But beyond their military use, these spaces also became makeshift homes. Soldiers carved their names into the chalk walls, sometimes alongside dates, hometowns, or small sketches. One chalk cavern bears the name Ernest Jackson, etched deep into the wall beside it. The date September 1916, perhaps the day he carved it or the day he died. You can almost imagine him here, whiling away an idle moment, taking a knife and tracing the curve of his name onto the rough stone, trying to leave a mark that might outlast the chaos above. Here, in the dim lamplight, the chalk dust swirling around him, a soldier named Harry drew a picture of a dog. He drew a horse. On the same wall, a third soldier drew a woman in a wide skirt, her hair tied with a bow. A fourth made a sketch of a pub, then wrote, "I hope to be back soon." These tunnels were never meant to be works of art. They were battlegrounds, not galleries. Yet somehow, here in the dark, men found moments of peace, joy, memory. And in doing so, they added poetry to the dust and grit of war. These tunnels stretched out beneath the landscape of the Western Front, weaving beneath the killing fields, disappearing under no man's land. Some were dug by hand, some with pickaxes and shovels. Others were blasted with explosives hollowed out of the chalk like a bird's nest. And in the end, they formed a subterranean landscape as intricate as the one above, a chalk labyrinth filled with rooms and passages. In some cases, they descended deep into the earth, reaching down into the darkness as much as 30 meters below the surface. Here, cut off from the sounds of war, men lit lanterns and scratched out a semblance of life. Rations were brought down, candles flickered, men slept. Sometimes they sang, sometimes they wrote letters home. These tunnels were not just for fighting. They were for living, for enduring, they were for survival. It wasn't always easy. The air was thick with dust, the silence broken only by dripping water, the scrape of tools. Sometimes the tunnels flooded, sometimes the sides collapsed. Sometimes men were trapped, injured, or killed. There was little air down here, and in the dim oil lamplight, it was hard to see. But in many ways, the tunnels were safer than the surface. While they were bombarded by artillery, they were never exposed to the full force of incoming shells. No man's land above was a graveyard of exploded bodies and twisted metal. Down here, there was no sky, no wind, no rain. It was easier to forget the war. At least that was the hope. The experience of war below ground was different from the one above. While officers planned assaults and barrages, while scouts watched and waited, while stretcher-bearers ran through the hail of bullets, here, in the darkness of the tunnels, there was a different kind of tension. There was the tension of claustrophobia, of the unknown. There was the tension of limited resources, of lingering fear. Down here, the loudest sound could be the drip of water. The softest, the scrabble of a mouse. Soldiers came and went, shifts changed, messages passed from hand to hand. Down here, life continued, life in its quietest forms, life in the shadows. Life went on below the surface too. Soldiers carved their names into the chalk walls, sometimes alongside dates, hometowns, or small sketches. Archaeologists have found crude drawings of women, of churches, of animals, reminders of lives and places far away. One can imagine a soldier resting between duties, carving the curve of a letter into the wall with the tip of a knife, trying to leave a mark that might outlast the chaos above. There were signs of daily life too. Rusted food tins, fragments of boots, the remains of candles burned down to stubs. These objects remind us that life underground had its own rhythm. The shuffle of boots on chalk floors, the echo of whispered voices, the scraping sound of picks as men extended the tunnels deeper. And not all tunnels were remembered after the war ended. Some were sealed, others forgotten beneath the soil as fields returned to farming. In recent years, Archaeologists have rediscovered some of these hidden places. In the Somme region, entire networks have been unearthed, remarkably preserved. Wooden ladders still lean against walls, graffiti remains clear, and in some cases, personal belongings lie undisturbed where they were left. Standing here in the heart of a chalk cavern, brushing dust from a faded sketch of a woman, you can't help but wonder about the man who drew it. What did he look like? Where was he from? Did he ever return home? And what happened to him here? Was this the place he died? Sometimes nature reclaims the tunnels, roots growing in the dark, vines creeping up the walls. Sometimes they remain empty, echoing chambers of war. But wherever they are, however they are, these tunnels still exist, hidden beneath the landscape of the Western Front, bearing witness to a world of war unlike any other. For 4 years, the world watched as armies clashed on the muddy fields of France, locked in a struggle that seemed to have no end. Men went missing, trenches were bombed, villages were leveled. By the end, more than 1 million men would be dead. The Western Front was one of the most destructive theaters of war in history, but below the surface there was a different story. The story of a secret world of tunnels, of chalk and shadow, of a war unlike any other. It was a war without mud, without blood, without the cries of men being torn apart by shellfire. It was a war of silence. When we think of the Great War, we often imagine the mud of the trenches, the wasteland of no man's land, the horror of poison gas and machine gun fire. But below, hidden in the earth, another story unfolded. A story of dust and darkness, of cramped spaces and quiet courage, of lives lived in the hush of underground tunnels, far from the killing fields above. A story that reminds us that war is not just fought on the surface, but in every shadow and crevice, because war is everywhere. In the end, the trenches were empty. The Western Front fell silent. But down here, in the darkness, the silence remained unbroken. For down here, the war never really ended. It just went quiet. If you think your job is stressful now, just wait until you hear about the workdays of a World War I British general. Here's one of our favorite historical tales to get you in the mood for the weekend. In the first years of World War I, Lieutenant General Sir Douglas Haig commanded the British Expeditionary Force on the Western Front. During the Battle of the Somme in 1916, he directed troops in a massive offensive against entrenched German forces. Now we all know what it's like to be buried alive in paperwork. But trust me, this pile has got nothing on the mountains of documents processed by Haig's staff during the Battle of the Somme. Imagine the scene. The year is 1916, and the place is the Western Front. A steady drizzle paints the landscape in shades of grey. Men and machines alike seem swallowed by a perpetual fog of mud. The Battle of the Somme is raging, and the stakes couldn't be higher. At the heart of this maelstrom sits a small team of Haig's clerks. Theirs is a seemingly never-ending task, mountains of paper and ink steadily piling up on their desks. In this dimly lit corner of the war room, the battle unfolds not on a canvas of mud and steel, but on a sea of forms and files. Each document carries the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Haig's clerks have no choice but to dive headfirst into this tidal wave of bureaucracy. Among them is Captain Frederick H. Sykes, an officer whose role is as vital as any on the front line. Sykes and his colleagues don't trade bullets for artillery fire. Instead, they exchange pens for rifles, their courage tested not by enemy fire, but by an onslaught of paperwork. As the battle rages outside, the room is filled with the scratch of quills and the rustle of turning pages. The ticking clock is their only reminder of the urgency of their task. These aren't just numbers or entries in a ledger. Each form represents a soldier, a life. Behind every figure is a face etched with hope, courage, and fear. There's Thomas Jones, Private Jones, missing in action. His mother's plea for word of her son fills the clerk's heart with empathy, yet another name added to the already overflowing list of the missing. Then there's John Riley, a young soldier whose discharge papers lie before Sykes. Relief washes over him as he stamps the approval. At least one young man will soon be returning home, albeit forever marked by the horrors he's seen. For these clerks, it's not just about filling out forms, it's about grappling with the raw realities of war. They're the silent heroes, toiling in the shadows, their bravery measured in the countless lives they help touch. As the days turn into weeks and the stacks of paperwork grow ever higher, their dedication never wavers. With each passing hour, they inch closer to victory. One form, one stamp, one letter at a time. But let's take a moment to really understand the scale of their mission. We're talking about the British Expeditionary Force on the Western Front, a force that swelled to over 500,000 men by late 1916. Every single one of these men had a story, a family, a life that was part of a larger narrative of a nation at war. And each of these men needed supplies, ammunition, food, medicine, clothing, and at some point probably paperwork. It wasn't uncommon for major military operations to involve tens of thousands of men. And for each man, there were multiple documents, orders, reports, inventories, medical records, casualty lists, supply requisitions. It was a staggering amount of paperwork. Multiply that by the number of men involved in the war, and you start to get a sense of the challenge facing Haig's clerks. To put this in perspective, if you were to stack up all the documents involved in the Battle of the Somme, assuming an average thickness of, say, 1 centimeter, the pile would rise over 25 meters into the air. That's about the height of an 8-story building. Imagine having to process all the paperwork associated with an 8-story high stack of files every day. That was the reality for these clerks. And let's not forget the constant threat of aerial attacks, which meant that the safety of the entire staff hung in the balance as bombs rained down overhead. Just imagine trying to fill out a form while dodging falling debris. It's a testament to the resilience and dedication of these men that they didn't let the chaos around them deter them from their vital work. Now let's talk about the tools at their disposal. Forget about computers and fancy office equipment. These guys were working with what they had: quill pens and paper. It wasn't unusual for clerks to go through dozens, if not hundreds of pens a day, their feathers worn down by the relentless scratching on parchment. Paper, too, was a precious resource, so much so that it was often reused, with documents stamped on the back to indicate they'd been through the shredder once already. Despite the odds stacked against them, these clerks pressed on. They worked through nights, fueled by coffee and the sheer weight of responsibility. Sleep was a luxury they couldn't afford, rest a memory from a time before the war. Their dedication bordered on obsession. Some developed nervous habits, others grew gaunt with worry, but none faltered in their duty. Haig himself knew the value of his team. He understood that without their tireless efforts, the war effort would grind to a halt. Though he never publicly acknowledged their service, he ensured they had the resources, well, most of the time, that they needed to do their jobs. If you want to learn more about the Battle of the Somme, check out our channel. Beyond the mountain of paperwork, Sykes and his fellow clerks faced another formidable foe, the ticking clock. Time, as always, was of the essence, but in war, it was a weapon as sharp as any bayonet. They worked under a constant shadow of urgency, aware that each form, each letter represented a life that could turn on a dime from hope to tragedy. Take, for instance, the case of Private William Thomas. On September 25, 1916, his name appeared on a casualty list, wounded in action. A clerk like Sykes would have noted the date, read the report of his injury, and filed it away. For a moment, that was all that separated Thomas from the abyss of forgotten faces, the countless casualties of war. But then something happened. Maybe it was a twist of fate, perhaps a bureaucratic oversight. Thomas's name was pulled from the pile. The clerk had to locate the original form, verify the details, and update the record. In a system that valued efficiency over empathy, this was an anomaly, a blip in the relentless march of paperwork. But for Thomas, it was a lifeline, a chance that he might live to see another day, another casualty list. Without this intervention, his name might have been lost forever. Another entry in a ledger, another ghost in a sea of uniforms. It's a stark reminder of the human drama unfolding behind every desk, every stamp, every letter. Those clerks weren't just processing documents, they were shaping destinies. They were deciding who lived and who died, who came back and who stayed lost in the quagmire of war. Picture this. You're a World War I pilot soaring through the skies in your trusty plane. Suddenly, a piercing buzz echoes through the cockpit, and before you can react, you're locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse with an enemy fighter. Adrenaline pumps through your veins as you dodge and weave, desperate to outmaneuver your pursuer. But wait, before you dive into the dogfight of your life, allow me to introduce you to a hidden hero of the skies. Behind the scenes of this aerial ballet is a team of unsung heroes, a squadron of ground crew working tirelessly to keep your plane in tip-top shape. Meet George, a bespectacled mechanic with grease-stained hands and a cool head. As you wrestle with the enemy ace, George and his team spring into action. They swarm your plane, a flurry of activity as they inspect every bolt, every wire, making sure your aircraft is ready for the next sortie. With practiced precision, they tighten loose screws, replace damaged wings and run tests on your engine, all while you engage in death-defying aerial maneuvers. It's a delicate balancing act, a test of nerves and skill, as George and his crew manage to get your plane back into the fight just as the enemy ace takes aim. You bank sharply, diving towards the clouds, and thanks to George's quick thinking, your plane holds up under the strain. As you weave through the sky, you know that you're not alone. You have a whole squadron of silent heroes watching your back, ensuring that you're always ready to face whatever the skies throw at you. They're the unsung heroes of the skies, the backbone of your aerial dominance. Remember them when you hear the roar of the engines or see the enemy planes diving overhead, because without them, you wouldn't be soaring through the skies. You'd be grounded with a busted plane and a busted wing. And don't forget to show some love to the hard-working folks who keep our videos running smoothly. Your support means everything to us, just like these ground crews mean everything to our daring pilots. So hit that subscribe button and join our squadron today. Together, we'll soar to new heights and uncover the stories that matter. Well, now it's time to wrap things up. But before we go, we need your help. We've given you two very different sides of war, and now we want to hear from you. Which life do you think was more challenging? A desk-bound clerk or a pilot relying on ground crew? Let us know in the comments. And hey, don't forget to join our growing community. We've got all sorts of historical tales waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you next time. The ground shakes, a whistle blows, and I find myself falling, sliding down into the dark heart of the earth. It's cold, clammy earth, and I land with a thump in an even colder, clammy puddle. Can't stay here. My feet are heavy, leaden. I need to move. Moving, I duck under a low-hanging wire stretched taut between two rotting posts. This place stinks. I push the stench away, focus on my task. Onward to the light above. Now I clamber up a muddy slope, pulling myself onto the fire-spitting rim of a crater. I look down into the gaping maw of the abyss. A shell hole like this can swallow a man whole, bury him alive. I'd rather be in the tunnel below. That's no better. But right now, I can't go back. There's work to be done. I step carefully over the pitted landscape, dodging jagged shell holes. The ground shakes again. There's another whistle, not the high-pitched screech of incoming artillery. The air raid siren wails. I pull my heavy greatcoat tighter around me and run towards the relative safety of a dugout. I'm one of the lost generation. For 4 years, I've been slogging through mud, crawling through filth. Now I have lice, and I hear whispers around me, rumors that soon I could be shipped home. But for now, The rain pours and the wind moans. Winter has come to the Western Front. As the rain soaks through my thin cotton uniform, I think of the great houses of England, of cricket matches, of blazing fires and books, of peaceful evenings at home. That life feels very far away. Weary, hungry, thirsty, I trudge along. A dog barks in the distance, another sound I'd rather do without. Somewhere in the gloom, a soldier coughs, the sound rasping, rattling, the cough of a man with nothing left. I've seen too many of those coughs end in death. At last I can make out the shape of a building, a wooden hut, the promise of shelter. Relief floods through me. Here in this hut I might find dry bread, a hot drink. Perhaps here the warmth of humanity flickers still. I push open the door. Inside, men huddle over a small fire, their faces lined, etched by the ceaseless grime of war. I shiver, hugging myself against the chill of the room. One of the men nods at me. "Come closer," he seems to say. "Share the meager heat, the little food we have. Together we endure." I wake. I'm lying on a mattress, clean sheets over me, the smell of lavender in my nostrils. A woman bustles around the room, fussing over me. She lays a steaming mug on my bedside table. What a strange dream I had. Oh, I remember. The mud, the blood, the endless grey sky. Thank God that was just a dream. I take a sip of tea. Warmth spreads through me, chasing away the remnants of the nightmare. The day stretches ahead, full of possibility. I hear birds singing outside. Soon I am up and dressed, ready for a new day. What will today bring, I wonder, adjusting my crisp white collar. A newspaper lies on the table, the ink still wet. It speaks of the Kaiser's victories, of our glorious boys doing their duty. My duty! I feel a sudden lurch in my stomach. They're calling up more men. Am I ready to go? Have I done enough already? I served my time. Wasn't that enough? It should be. But the war is still on. And perhaps there's something more I can do, some greater purpose waiting for me. A messenger arrives, bearing orders, sealed in wax. With trembling hands, I break the seal and read. The letter is addressed to me, to my family. My father's handwriting, firm, strong, precise. He asks if I am well, if I am holding up. He says he and mother are proud of me, proud of my service, proud of my sacrifice. I reread his words, committing them to memory. Father, the respected judge, always so sure of himself, always certain of the right path. And now he admits that he doesn't know what's happening. What is happening, I ask myself? Are we really winning the war? Does any side really win a war? I look down at the mud caked on my boots, splattered on my uniform. I try to brush it off, but it won't come away. The mud is part of me now. My skin, my hair, my clothes, my soul. I'm covered with the muck of the Western Front. Onward, a loud voice rings out. I snap to attention. There's a new arrival. He's different from us. His uniform is brighter, his posture straighter. He looks like a school teacher. He's an officer. An officer doesn't get his hands dirty, doesn't know about the mud. I follow the others. We walk in single file, heads bent, shoulders stooped. We're being inspected. Oh, my boots. I glance down at them, then quickly away. They'll notice the mud, the filth. I gather myself up, straighten my spine, chin tilted slightly upwards. I don't care. I walk tall, even though my legs are leaden. I march boldly, though every fibre of my being wants to crawl. The officer turns away. He barks an order. We fall in behind him. He marches towards the trenches, and I follow, stumbling after him. I catch a glimpse of the same handsome face, the same bright uniform from another angle. He walks in the muddy puddles. Mud splashes up, clings to his boots. At last he stops. I stop. He looks at me. I start. I salute stiffly. He returns my salute. Do we really believe this will end soon? I wonder. Is it true, as they say, that it's almost over? That this horrible war is almost done? I find a trench, a dugout. I'm lying down. Beside me, other men sleep fitfully. We snore, cough, shift. Sometimes a man yells out in his sleep. I turn over, burying my face in my arm. Someone whistles. Rats scurry in the darkness. The air is stale, thick with sweat and stale waste. I shift again, trying to find a comfortable position. I can't. I must get out. The sky is bruised, the color of old blood. The wind whistles through the tall grass. I walk across the scarred landscape. I'm on parade. The officer watches us. He looks bored. He taps his riding crop against the palm of his gloved hand. A bugler plays a jaunty tune. We sing along. The music makes my throat tighten. Why are we doing this? What are we fighting for? I can't answer. The officer raises his hand. Silence falls. We stand rigid. The bugle stops. Then the officer gives the word and we march forward. We climb into the trenches. I clutch the familiar ropes. These trenches are my home now. My name is carved on the wall beside me. My John, my Tom, my Dick, my Harry. They're all dead now. I clutch the rope tighter. In my dreams they call out to me. They beckon me to join them. And sometimes at night I hear them. I hear the ghosts of men long gone. They speak of home and hearth, of mothers and sisters, sweethearts and children. I listen, leaning into the cool darkness. Dawn comes. I watch it paint the sky pale gold. The sun rises cold and hard. The dead leaves stir. A beetle crawls on a broken twig. I shiver. The morning mist hangs heavy. I smell dew and damp earth. Sounds drift to me on the breeze. A cuckoo calls. A rooster crows somewhere far away. Birds tweet, and I hear the lowing of cattle. It's a sound that seems almost alien. How strange to think of cows grazing, of fields of green, of fences and barns. It's so long ago. Such a life feels foreign. I turn away from the rising sun, from the hope of a new day. I step back into the trenches. The day stretches before me, long and grey. I push my helmet back from my forehead. I wipe the sweat from my brow. I'm hot, itchy, tired. So tired. I want to go home. I want to sleep in a real bed, eat real food, breathe clean air. I want to see a smile that isn't grimy and tired, to hold a hand that isn't stiff and cold. I want to see the light of day, not the flickering glow of a candle in a dugout, but the sun climbing into a boundless sky, to feel the warmth of its rays on my skin. I close my eyes and imagine the sun on my face. Imagine green meadows and babbling brooks, a wife's gentle touch, a child's laughter, the taste of fresh berries, the smell of honeysuckle. When I open my eyes, I'm back in the trenches, but for a moment, just a moment, I'd forgotten the mud, the blood, the deafening roar of artillery. That's it for this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button. If you love history and want to learn more about amazing stories like this one, subscribe for more historical tales.